I think it's a common thing across, well, at least the people that I chatted with, that you're not afraid to die in that situation just because, well, you're so tired that probably you will rest finally. But you're afraid about what brings death. That's the
Mm.
weird, really weird situation because you like don't care much about, well, what will happen to you, but you're afraid as hell of those rockets and like just artillery and stuff flies like above your head.
Hello, hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to Shit You Don't Want to Talk About. I'm here to get the conversation started. You're here to get uncomfortable. It's your choice to be a part of the change, changing shit you don't want to talk about into shit to talk about. Hello, hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to Shit to Talk About, where we turn things that are shit you don't want to talk about into shit to talk about. Today we have Avaja, who actually used to be a colleague of mine in a past life, and I'm I hate saying that I'm not excited about these conversations because it's like we talk about tough shit, but it's something that's very, very needed. So, Vaja, please introduce yourself and the shit you want to talk about.
Hey Jen, thanks for having me. So yeah, as Jen mentioned, we worked together in the past in one company. Well, it was quite a long time ago, but still something to remember. And yeah, I'm based of Ukraine. I live in Kiev, the capital city, right now. Yeah, today I'm all yours about, of course, questions about how I make through every day and all that. It's not that well grim, we'll be honest, but still, well, there are some things to consider. So yeah, I'm here to help you guys to, well, first of all, to share my experience, to share my learnings. Maybe it would be useful for somebody in the, I hope it won't be useful for somebody in the future, but you never know, right? So we live in really chaotic world at the moment. So yeah, I hope my lessons will help somebody.
And thank you for that. It's definitely we're recording this in 2024 and we are over 2 years now that there's
Yeah,
been war going on, and we're seeing this in even more countries that it's for a lot of individuals, if it's not in the news feed in the US at least, they don't always remember that there's these type of things going on and how privileged other countries are to not have to experience these type of things, or what life is like for individuals experiencing living in during a war and in areas of war. So that is probably the most we're going to talk about the war itself is that we can link more details in the show description if anybody wants to do more research on the political side of things. That is on their own terms. We just want to know more about your life in general and how you've managed while also working at the same time while you've been going through all of this the last couple of years. Question number one, and I feel like this is it's so detailed on the questions that we came up with, and also uh, asking on in general, if somebody were to ask me what aspects of your life have changed, I'd be like, I don't know. It it happened so quickly, or things didn't happen quickly, that it's hard to see changes necessarily. But did you see changes from what life was like before 2022 and what life was like afterwards? Did you see big changes there?
well, certainly. Well, my life changed completely. Just because of one fact is that my hometown is actually located on the very west of country, or very east. I'm sorry, the very east of Ukraine, in Luhansk region. I'm from city named Serensk. So, and well, it was one of the, well, not, I think, yeah, it was one of the first major cities that were taken during the spring offensive. Probably it was standing for, well, a couple of months, and after it fall. But well, of course, we moved earlier than that. But yeah, if I, let's say, would live somewhere on the very west of country where, well, nothing happened in terms of, well, the actual, well, military operations on the ground. So the most threat on the western regions of the country, usually it comes from the sky, like rockets and stuff like that, some drones. But well, on the west, it was, well, like Second World War, like with trenches, artillery, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, so certainly everything changed because, well, I relocated 3 times, and I settled here in the capital after a while. So yeah, and well, since obviously I don't have, well, a home anymore, and well, the hometown, I think it's like mostly destroyed. So yeah, it's definitely changed. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
A big part of it, and something that we talked about in our pre-interview was just being able to keep the mindset you have of keeping things hopeful, and just with your life changing so much and having to move so much, and then it just it's hard to imagine even not having a hometown anymore. How did you be able to keep the mindset and be able
Mhm.
to have hope?
Oof, yeah, that's a tough question. Well, to be honest, well, there's no clear answer to that, right? Because it's a combination of things. Well, one of the actually important things in my life back in the day was the support of my team at my work. Because, like, who knew that? But, well, actually, it was kind of, I was not expecting it, to be honest, because all people were reaching out, they were trying to help me in any possible way. They were always asking, they were super helpful, they were really caring, because all of my environment, it was like destroyed like in one day. Okay, so I don't have like any friends because like all the people just moved in like different places, different countries, because, well, of course we were uh, more concerned about, well, uh, making well, I don't know, make it out of there, right, as far as possible. So there were no station where somebody would reach out to me and just ask me like if I still alive or not. So that's like a awkward situation, but like all your environment that used to cease to exist, like in a split second. So that's hard to prepare to that. And like this like work where I had this, it's like counterweight of sorts. And I understood that, well, the world is still spinning, some people are still living their lives, like at least I have some like island of stability around me. So well, of course I wasn't working as the war started. I think I took a break like for 10 days maybe maximum, and after that I decided to, well, start to work again, just because, well, yeah, that was something that kept me, well, busy. Because, well, there's not much you can do about station around you, and if you're not busy fleeing from the, well, harmful things, well, probably you have some time, I don't know, to focus on something, to talk to people that are actually not that, well, disturbed by situation around them. So yeah, it was one of the things that helped me back in the day. And the second thing, I think, but it's still, I think it's still relevant up to this day, because we have no right to like exhale for once and just relax. And this like this mood is never changes during the war, just because I will be so much trouble if I will relax. So we're just trying to not to think about everything, right? We're just trying to mm, let it pass through you without any interaction with your inner things, because you will have quite pretty bad day, because in our news feed there is not a single good news like for I don't know, like almost like 2.5 years, even more than that. So yeah, probably it's escapism of sorts. I don't think that this is very good idea, to be honest. But the first thing that you will find out during situations like that is that you can keep up with everything that's happening around. It's just way too much for a single person to just overcome. So you start to ignore things, and you need some island of stability. Maybe your work, family, hobby. I don't know. Pick what works for you. But that was quite helpful for me.
Thank you. Um, some questions that came to mind and is what kind of work do you do? Like, I know that you and I used to work together, so I may not have asked that in the very beginning. But what kind of work do you do or were doing back then?
Oh yeah, sure. Luckily it's still the same. So I work as a software developer. So yeah, that's what I do. Sitting at laptop and clicking the buttons, which is a great thing actually, as it turned out. Just because we started, I immediately figured out that being able to work from any place in the world, that's a blessing. So
Yeah.
I, I'm glad with my profession choice.
Is eh, when you first had to move and everything happened so quickly, were there did you still have a means of communication with your friends and family to be able to check in, or did cell phones go down?
Oh, not with all of them, but with most of them, yes. So, because most of the people, they were going like everywhere where possible. So usually, in the modern world, it's a bit easier, right? Because if you have cell phone, and most likely you will, because I think during those uh, I don't know. During that situation, I think it's the most valuable thing that you can have. But yeah, so I still have communications with them. But yeah, it's hard to maintain the friendship, because like all the people are so busy with just trying to get back to their previous lives, which will never happen, by the way. And this is one thing to always remember, that there is no past anymore. There's only future. I think it's a good advice for all the people, but we always tend to ignore it, right? But yeah, there is no past. So we don't have a past. We don't have past places, relationships, no nothing. So it's probably better to start living your today lives. And with some people, I still maintain quite close relationships, and some of my friends are still in Ukraine, which is awesome. But some people left, and it's really hard to maintain the proper conversations with them, because we're busy with such a different set of problems that it is becoming harder and harder to find something in common. So that's one of the issues. But I think it's still valid if some friend of yours will move to a different country, right? So it'd be like a bit harder. But here we have like this multiplayer, so it's even harder for me.
Yeah, and uh, something that you talked about was like, especially being a software engineer, you could work from anywhere. How did that change for other people? Was it did their jobs have to change? Do a lot of people work remotely as software engineers around you, or were there job changes in like what was available for work or what people could do for work?
Oh yeah, that's very interesting question. Yeah, so certainly, not most, but at least like half of the people that surround me, they were like somewhat involved in any kind of IT work, right? So some documentation writers, QA engineers, so software developers. So, if you will, forget that you don't have home and all that fun stuff. So, they can still work as usual without any troubles, and most of them were employed not in my hometown, which is important because, well, there's no hometown almost. So, they were still employed, they were still able to provide for their families. So, that's a really beneficial thing to be able to work remotely. But for other half of the people, it was, well, this still rough, just because they lose their jobs immediately. Like anything that is like on land, it's ceased to exist, right? So they will need to, they relocated. And sometimes, like if you will land in, let's say like European Union, they have some quite good actually compensation like packages. Not sure how to call them properly, for the refugees. So it's like more or less they will keep you. Well, they will like maintain you, support you for, well, at least like a year or something, till you'll be able to maybe learn language or new profession. But for the other people who still in Ukraine, it's kind of hard because, well, again, there's a bunch of people moving from those regions. I think I heard statistics back in the day because, like, population of the country, it's close to like 40-ish million, maybe like 42 at the moment, and 10 of them relocated. So just imagine. Well, of course, some big chunk of those 10 millions went to, well, Europe and abroad, but, well, people who still remain here, that's a, well, tough situation for them. It's really hard to find the work, and government. Well, we understand that the government doesn't have all the resources, and, well, situations, well, far from being perfect, so they can't provide for those people enough of like compensation or support packages to, well, provide for their families. So that's that's an unfortunate reality, fortunately. So it's rather hard.
Did you see any new jobs that arose through the need of the changes?
Oh yeah, certainly. Well, we have 1 million army at the moment, so there's quite lots of good. Well, good. Well, it's a job opportunity, right? So you can enlist in the army. Uh, well, of course, compensations, well, far from being perfect, but I think it's international things, right? Because, well, in military, it's not uncommon that people are being paid not minimal wage, but, well, something like you can earn more working in civilian industries than in military. But, well, yeah, that's one potential way, I think, to find a work for you. And another thing, well, I can't even imagine the other. Well, probably like, no, maybe some people who work in like international organizations, because international organizations usually they have local representatives, right? So if you're fluent in English and can do some, well, probably like economical accounting stuff, maybe you can find a place to work. But well, the station around me, it's about, well, the last opportunities and not like new ones, right? So yeah, so but yeah, there's definitely, well, a couple of things that you can try to yeah.
You brought up something that is sticking out to me. How many, just in like your own friends or family, how many individuals speak English or learned English?
Well, like in percentage, like in my environment,
Yeah.
right? Oh, wow, that's well, certainly, like most of people, they try to learn English nowadays because, well, of course, all my friends who work in IT, they more or less familiar with English, and, well, at least they can read and potentially write, maybe not talk, but, well, it's only about the practice, right? But as for the rest, I think the most the biggest part of my friends, like 70% of my friends, they can't even, well, they barely can read and barely understand English, so it's rather hard for them, because, well, it's a bit more, it's a bit easier in the, let's say, like central region of the country, where we have like these big cities. It's like it's usual thing, right, to learn uh, some language in school. But my generation, we were studying in 90s. It was like this like horrible post-Soviet Union era. Had like nothing. Like it was way worse than Soviet Union actually. So my generation in particular, we kind of like we miss on all those stuff. Of course, our parents, of course, because, well, nobody knew English, just because, well, they were studying Soviet Union. And this applies to us because Soviet Union stopped to exist in '92, right? And but there were still nothing created to compensate the lack of, well, existing educational programs. So it was like this weird period when, like, and I think my generation, like plus or minus a couple of years, were affected the most because of that. And I happen to know English just because my teacher in the school, she was from Estonia, as far as I remember. So she was quite fluent. She was quite fluent in English. So that's what helped me. But it's coincidence. So
You keep asking, like, bringing up points that I'm like, I want to ask you about, and,
sure.
so thank you. That does make it helpful. Of, it's something that was it the type of thing, especially with, um, the changes with Soviet Union and the '90s, was it something that a state of fear or untrust of that something like this could have happened or would happen growing up? Was that always something in the back of the mind of your community, or something that you've always had to take into consideration?
Mm, oh, yeah, that's a very interesting question. And again, I can speak only about the eastern part of the country, just because I happened to live there back in that period of time. I can't speak for the rest of the country because I think, well, it was the opposite to what was happening there. Because east of the, my entire region borders, it shares border with Russia. So we were quite heavily affected by Russia's propaganda back in the day. So we haven't thought till the 2014, I believe, that something like that could ever happen potentially. Just because, well, propaganda was so good, and it is still good. I think it's still one of their core strengths, and they usually rely on it. And you can imagine the country, well, at least in my head, I imagine in the country like as a gradient, like from the very east, where it's like really strong, and to very west, where it's like barely visible in terms of like propaganda and like Russian involvement into like day-to-day lives, because it was everywhere, because we were watching their like stand-up shows, we were listening to Russian music, we were watching Russian movies. It was such a natural thing. And back in the day, it was so horrible, but it is still it still happened because people who spoke Ukrainian, they were considered to be like, I think redneck would be appropriate analog in US, like, like people of, well, from countryside, not the sharpest one. So it was like common stereotype, which is, well, turned out to be a narrative of Russian propaganda as well, which is, well, now I know. But yeah, back in the day, it wasn't popular to speak Ukrainian. Even like in the very Western, like this, like cradles of Ukrainian culture, it was still a thing. Like if you talk in Russian, like you're like member of like higher society or like more educated person. And like I had bunch of like scientific and just books about technology, and they were all Russians, because in Ukrainian you can barely find like, I don't know, like just some really basic literature, not more than that, or classics. All the rest was Russian. So it was like really hard to even imagine something like that because it was so deep in our lives, and that's another challenge that we need to overcome, because all the like you start to understand that, well, I'm like 35 now, so everything that I knew, well, at least till my like 20s, like mid 30s, it was a lie, and we need to adjust and understand that, like, rethink a bunch of things and figure out your place in this world. Just because, well, you're so disoriented because everything was, well, propaganda of sorts. Well, of course, we should do better than that and be start thinking more critical back in the day, but it's never happened. So yeah, in 2014, well, since I again I lived on the in the eastern part of the country, so the actual combat zone was like 15 miles from my hometown, so not quite far. So we, well, of course, we were affected quite heavily, and we relocated for like 6 months to other place. Well, we returned back after that when it became more stable. It, there wasn't like there were a couple of cases of like shelling on the civilians from the Russian side, but not much more than that. So it's all ended, and we just like ended in the like the stable front line. So it was relatively safe to live there, but we certainly experienced all this, well, beauties of, well, this station. But back in the day, well, country was trying to continue their lives, go with their lives. Like, we had a feeling that we were abandoned, and that was not pleasant thing to feel. Okay, because, well, we all knew what can happen and what happened, and the fact that this would happen just matter of time. But most of the country, they try to go on with their lives, and that's like it's a very basic thing that every human being will try to do. If you will see something going on that you can't explain, that you don't know how to deal with, you will try to ignore it or adapt to it and ignore it. So, but, well, the thing that happened in 2022, well, nobody was able to ignore it. It was so severe. So that's why that was eye-opening for the most, for the majority of the country's population, because they were, well, there was no like unstable east and the rest of stable country. It was like whole unstable country. So people started to, well, think more critically, and I think that's what helped us, well, at least to regain our like national identity, start to get rid of this propaganda of all that stuff that was around us for tens of years.
Yeah. And that's, I can only imagine how life changing, just not only what's going on physically, but also having to realize that so much of life wasn't true with
Yeah,
propaganda or
you live in
having
Matrix,
to,
like, well, yeah, that's
yeah,
kind of the same experience, I think, more or less. But yeah, that is true. And like, the word thing that, well, you have like, we usually try to blame somebody, right? But there's no one to blame, because you should blame yourself in the first place to not thinking more critically about the stuff, because it was so obvious. Well, now we know, right? It was so obvious, but, well, we still ignored it just because, well, regimes like, well, all the like dictatorship regimes, I think the only thing they share in common across like the entire world, at least that's my like 2 cents on this situation, just they try to exploit this bug in human nature that we all try to adapt and ignore stuff that's happening around. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to, well, protest or uh, getting beaten by, I don't know, some police man or something like that. So we just want to go on with our lives, and that's when things start to happen, right? So again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, if, well, you plan to stay away from politics, politics won't stay away from you. Luckily, we don't have politics anymore because, well, the first thing that we learned when the guns are talking, well, there's no politics. So that's a good thing, well, and a bad thing. So, But yeah, there is no
Yeah.
political discussion clearly happening right now. So now we stay from politics.
Something that you mentioned earlier that I'm know that there's other countries that do this, and I'm curious if Ukraine is one of. You mentioned like the jobs that the military is something someone can do.
Mhm.
Is the Ukraine a country that requires everyone to go through the military when they're at a certain age?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
But well, it wasn't. Well, there were uh, this big period. I think. Well, I think yeah, it was happening maybe like till 2014 actually, because after that we started to realize well, we actually well, it's probably not the bad idea to have a functioning military because we have such wonderful neighbor. But before that, people were just trying to avoid military at all costs because well, military was well, most people considered to be a waste of time. And let's be honest, it actually was because, well, obviously we didn't have like functioning equipment. It was like a little Soviet army, how we called it. Like, yeah, you will learn nothing. You will just well waste 1.5 years, I believe, in our case. So most of people try to go to universities with like military classes there. So and after that, you were given the opportunity to skip the serving in military which wasn't uncommon, and that's how it worked. So some friends of mine served in military, and they just well they can confirm like the stuff that I'm talking about. Just like they wasted some time there, some period of time because well, you won't earn any money because I don't think that they were paying back in the day. Maybe they were, but something like super insignificant, way below the minimal wage and you were I don't know like maybe doing some gardening for officers and stuff just like it wasn't military but well it all changed drastically so I think we still will have this well tradition but now like in the proper way so
Yeah. What and since and thank you for going a bit back on like the history and getting to this point and how a bit of the mental side of things and emotional side of things of the country even leading up to this after when your city was affected and you had to move away, what were the changes in like your daily routines and activities? Like how long did it take just to be able to start having a creating routines and activities?
mm, well certainly I wasn't thinking about any of that well at least for like 6 months I believe it was combination of trying to survive and escapism like when I was working right because I knew that well people who work with me like they don't need to know about all of that and it's not like I'm having a session with psychologists or like something like that so I always thought that it's really inappropriate to share what's going on just because first of all it's hard for people to understand that it will like put some pressure on them and why shouldn't I do this it was actually helping me as well just because when well while I was working I wasn't thinking about surrounding situation so that was helpful just try to abstract and think that pretend that everything is well as it should be. So yeah, that was helpful. But I tried to well at least get back to well my kind of like gym routine, but it wasn't possible because I moved to the very west of the country. Like we have like villages and mountains there, so it was well rather um like rural place I think but well still like I can like I was able to do running and stuff but I faced another issue is that like there were nothing in shops like no no, nothing. Like I well, since I left all my clothes and stuff because I moved like with small like this big backpack, and that was all. So basically, my laptop and some papers. That's it. So I figured, well, I don't have any stickers, and well, probably I should buy some. And that's not realized like there is no market in country at all. The only place where you was able to like find some goods, it was well, we had like Nalak like to eBay, like local version kind of, or like Facebook Marketplace, stuff like that. So their only way was to well buy some from people, and like Post was functioning more or less. We have Post service. It's commercial Post, not like the state analog. So it was functioning luckily, and I was able to well get some clothing and stuff. And yeah, that's when I started to do something with my life. Yeah, it's probably like 6 months, probably. Yeah.
Was you mentioned that the shops were impacted and just being able to get like some sneakers. What about for food, or was that affected too in the
Yeah.
shops there?
Yeah, it was a bit easier just because well, some humanitarian aid came through the western part of Ukraine, so it was a bit easier to obtain some goods there, and there were some spots where you can pick something, like a food or maybe some I don't know, some soap and stuff, just really basic things. But there wasn't enough stuff there for everyone who was in need. Shops, well, they had like bare minimum of stuff on shelves, like somebody basic food. Well, that was alright back in the day. It was not the well end of the world, but still, like if you're used to some, I don't know, certain products, most likely you won't find them. That's for sure. But the biggest thing that impacted me it was the well diapers because my son he was one back in the day, but 1 or 3 months I believe. So and it was really hard to find diapers. It was horrible. Just like trying to get them from anywhere and like obviously pharmacies no or supermarkets didn't have them. So yeah, that was a struggle. As for the food, well, it was very far from ideal, mostly canned food and stuff. But well, you can survive from that. To be honest, it wasn't bothering me that much back in the day, just because well, you figured well that there could be worse things than the canned food. So yeah, that's right. I think so. Yeah,
Yeah, I could see
everything's
that
affected. Everything's
changing
affected.
your diet.
Oh yeah, yeah. So oh my god, yeah, that's not really good for your diet, that's for sure. Well, if you live in like rural area, so well, there will be some local things, which is good because we have really good we have usually very good vegetables and stuff. But in that particular case, since this is mountains and they have like rocky soil and stuff, it's not really popular there. So yeah, if you will move to rural area, pick the area with I don't know, good tomatoes or something that you like. So that would be good.
Did you mentioned about like the lack of diapers and things like that? Did you see was there anything that surprised you of how the community did work together for certain things, or
Oh yeah.
working together for survival, or trying to I'm just like in my mind I could see others trying to help get you diapers or something like that, even though others if they saw it or something.
Well, that's a very good topic and one of the most eye-opening things during this war because I was indefinitely uh how to call it, like I was really surprised how good people could be in certain situations and how bad they can be in the same situation. That's very interesting observation that I had back in the day because certain people they were just stealing humanitarian aid from people hardcore needs because, well, I need to admit that was, well, not a pleasant experience because we knew that we were getting only like the leftovers of the actual aid. But on the other hand, certain people they helped in any way possible and imaginable. So yeah, I think because like the interesting thing is that I think, well, at least in my experience, all this collaboration and trying to do something for the, well, needs of the majority of community, stuff like that started to happening. I think maybe like when at least 3 to 6 months have passed from the very beginning of war, just because people were so disoriented, they had nothing. Well, they have no understanding about what's going on around them and what to do with it and how to live with it. So, and after they started to settle down. They started to like more or less orient themselves in the environment, and they took care about their like very basic needs like food and, well, diapers. You don't know. So we started to join our efforts in order to help others with the situation and help the front lines as well. So that was one of the best experiences. Still is because I was such disappointed in certain people, but I'm glad that there were more good people than, well, bad people. So I was not expecting that, will be honest, because the first thing that you think is, well, everybody is on their own, but, well, you're wrong, because actually you just need to look closer.
During that time, was there you mentioned, like, other people stealing and, like, even though there were others in need, was there any type of police or laws that were still being held, or did that all disappear during this time?
Well, I remember the first 10 days when the invasion started. We formed a so called, um, let me translate it for you. It's like local defense, kind of. It was basically a group of volunteers armed with, well, whatever they had, ranging from, I don't know, from some X to maybe some carbine. They have some. So yeah, that was it was an interesting experience. So those groups were patrolling the streets, and especially since like almost like all shops were closed, like completely, because there were all cities were heavily shelled by artillery or rockets or like all the means the Russians had at their disposal. Those groups were preventing the robbery of those stores and basically, um, forgot the words, murders. So yeah, so they were preventing those stores from being murders, as well as the flats and houses people left while they were fleeing. And we had a wonderful tradition. If they will catch somebody, they will just glue it with the sticky tape to the pole with their pants down, and they will wait for the police. And police sometime, if they knew where they going, they were taking their time. Like, no, they could like drive there for like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, and those poor guys were standing there like, yeah. So that was a good tradition. I think it was kind of, that's what prevented us from the spike in crime, because of course there was like murders, a ton of them, but people figured how to deal with them rather quickly. Like it was happening like the first week after invasion started, actually. So because nobody liked murders, nobody liked murders. So yeah.
Were there emergency services or anything that could help people if something happened?
Oh yeah, I think that's the only part of infrastructure that, well, was functioning properly, just because, well, that's basically critical infrastructure, right? Well, the healthcare, police of sorts. Well, police was very busy with all sorts of things, of course, but they like were doing their best to help civilians with their problems. Hospitals were functioning, but not all of them. Like I think half of the I moved to the town of to the city of Dnipro. It's the biggest, I think, city in the middle part of Ukraine. So we spent like 10 days probably there. So most of the hospitals were wasn't functioning properly, but well, at least you will be able to find first aid in any hospital potentially. But if you need something more intricate, I think, yeah, you will have quite a bad times, I think, because well, as usual in the war zone, people are most concerned by the explosive trauma, by like severe bleeding and stuff, just like first aid, and it's best. But as for the rest, yeah, that's an issue. Because, for example, um, my mother-in-law, she were mm, she had this like medicine for the thyroid, and she needs to take it all the time, just because well, that's a critical thing to her life, and it was impossible to buy it anywhere because pharmacies were functioning barely, but they didn't have that thing at their disposal. But we were able to source it actually for free from volunteers, but you need to look around because you will find the place most likely, but that would be troublesome. But it was free. It was quite nice because, well, that's a rather expensive thing. So yeah, that's
Yeah. That what was the like you mentioned that was free and it's yay for that. But what was the rest of everything like if to be able to was it still requirement for a lot of payments for things where cards working or like how did you have to experience like more of a barter system? What was that like?
all. Well, luckily we stayed away from barter system, but it was fun thing to do actually because the bank system was actually functioning properly. Well, of course, banks wasn't working properly, but the system as a whole was functioning. So you were able, like, but there were certain issues with the credit card, for example. First of all, it's well the stress that well people were experiencing resulted in well losing trust to bank system. So I will put it that way. So some people and some shops they were taking only cash just because they had no idea what will be well what will happen next, and maybe we'll need to flee. Well, and it would be better to have some cash on you rather than some plastic card. So that's what was one issue that we were facing. The second issue was well, since all the bank terminals they function off of cellular network, and cellular network wasn't functioning because this was one of the first things that they targeted, and yeah, we had no cellular uh, connection almost, like maybe like very basic uh, uh, like edge internet, I believe. So internet wasn't functioning, only voice calls and messages, and of course that led to most of terminal shutdown. So even if shop receive would accept the credit card, they most likely won't be able to charge you. And so the same thing goes for ATMs because people were standing, I don't know, like multiple hours in lines to get to the ATM to well somehow get to the cash just because well nobody were taking credit cards. So it wasn't fun experience, but if you will be able to at least find one ATM that was functioning and get some cash, most likely you will be able to survive because you won't be buying nothing significant, right? Only basic food, so uh, it won't be that hard. But well, I was surprised. But bank system was functioning, but well, there was always like these tiny nuances, and yeah, that was unfortunate. But yeah, after we get to the west part of the country, where well, at least there was cellular network, like everything was fine, surprisingly.
I what's a seller network?
Cellular, well, that's mobile phones network, GSM.
Oh, okay. Okay. So like just cell oh, so you said for
Cell
some
phone.
reason I was thinking no, I was thinking seller network like buy sell seller network,
Get it.
not like phone network.
That's a phone
Okay.
network, means of
Yeah.
communication, and that's the first thing that most likely will be affected. Because well, bunch of like kind of like casual military stuff, it's still happening through the civilian networks because well, we have it everywhere, right? And it's like super fast, and more times it's reliable. In some situations even more reliable than military stuff, just because we have so much of the infrastructure around us. But when it's affected, well, yeah, when then problems will start. Now we have Starlink, of course, which is amazing, but well, back in the day we had no Starlink, so
Yeah.
that's a bad thing.
Where was transportation still working at this time? Like buses or subway or any
Well,
trains?
well, kind of. Oh, it depends. It really depends because like railroads, they were overstressed just because like there were so much people moving. Like as I mentioned, around like 10 millions, maybe not like the whole 10 million started to move when the war started, but well, some millions. So and of course we don't have any network that is well that they can care of such a load because, for example, when we were traveling to the west of the country, this is usually in normal conditions it's like 10-hour drive, but we were be able to make it like in 3 days, I believe. So 3 days because like roads were just flooded by with cars. This it was horrible, and we had this like mm, we called commandant hour. I'm not sure if there's something. I mean, well, in addition, I'll look for that. But well, basically, this is an hour that after let's say like 10 p.m. or 12 p.m. you can't enter nor exit the city. So if you're well wasn't able to get through the patrols through the borderline of the city till well 12 p.m. let's say, well most likely you will spend the night in the car, which is not a pleasant thing, and you will need
Uh,
to till the morning to enter the city because there were like this four posts in every city on the
okay.
entrance exit, like on all the entrances and exits. There still are a bunch of them, but well, of course, they're like a bit more relaxed. But we still have the same rule because well, it doesn't apply only to the four posts because in the midnight, nobody is allowed to stay on the street. Well, of course you can give it a try, but most likely you'll have quite unpleasant conversation with police. And they can actually detain you. So we still have this rule, and yeah,
A curfew.
yeah,
Okay.
you need to plan very carefully your mile routes and marshroutes, just because well, there can be some issues with that.
If with there being curfews, um, are people even now, I mean, I can only imagine back then probably not as interested, but possibly. But can people go out and in the evenings or do they want to drink or things like that? Or stay out late? Do people do that anymore? Or is there still a curfew where um it's required to get in earlier?
Well, yeah, it's still required to get in earlier. Again, I think we have it was till 11 p.m., but they extended it to the 12 p.m. But after 12 p.m., well, most of the places they will close. Most of the like let's say bars that will be open till like late night or early morning, well, they're not working in that schedule anymore. So they usually close like at 11, so people will have time to get to their homes. Probably you can stay technically, but most likely will need to wait till like 6 a.m. I guess when it ends, yeah, to get back to home. So if that's something that well you want to do, probably you can. But yeah, some people they drink outside, but usually they try to well end their celebrations till the midnight. So yeah.
Some people can turn to like drinking or something like that for comfort, but a lot of people also turn to religion or spiritual practices. How did that change uh, during all of this? Were there still practices that were being held, or did did religion and spirituality ever disappear that you saw?
Oh, well, there is a saying that at war there is no atheists, or like in trenches there is no atheists, and yeah, I think it's quite accurate. But unfortunately, our church was quite affected as well because, like, the majority of churches in Ukraine, they were part of, well, I guess, uh, Patriarchy of Moscow, and we started to fight it, of course. So most of the churches, well, they went under the Ukrainian wing, but not all of them, because well, this is a religion, right? And some people they used to hear all the prayers in Russian, which is unfortunate because in Ukrainian there will be no Russian prayers, obviously. So certain people, especially elder people who used to well live in Soviet Union, although they lived an entire life in like Ukraine, but they still kind of do their religious stuff in Russian. So yeah, I think they were affected the most. But believe me or not, we have military well, basically religion services of sorts. Um, so there's usually I'm not sure how to translate the this like position to English, but well, there's definitely some um, well people in ropes and trenches, that's for sure. That they can provide you some mental assist. I think they try to stay away from weaponry, but they still wear the camouflage, the body armor and stuff, which is interesting thing. So yeah, there's a place for religion in this particular situation. I think yeah, it's even more intense.
Um, I think the word you're looking for is a chaplain.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a military, right? That's like a military like
a lot of
person.
military or hospitals, at least here in the US, will have a chaplain, which
Yes.
is somebody
Yeah.
that is religious, but does it for multiple religions instead of just one.
Well, we most of us are orthodox, so it's a bit easier on them. But I'm quite certain that they will provide assist to all the religions, right? Because we're a free country. We have Muslims, we have Catholics, we have Greek Catholics, we have Orthodox people here. So no, it's not about religion; it's about stuff that you're doing, right? And there's some. Well, and if you want to unite your people, give them enemy. So that's what happened in us. So yeah, we don't care about religions much. And the unfortunate thing is that you can't decline joining the military because of the reasons while a war is happening. That's against the law. Well, at least in Ukraine. So before the war, for example, you like can even skip this obligation to join the military if well religion prevents you from I don't know hurting somebody. But well, not anymore.
Thank you for joining us for part one of our conversation with Vaja. There is so much to discuss about life in Ukraine that this is going to be a one and two-part episode. This is part one. Our words of wisdom and gratitude are still going to be at the end of part two. Thank you for tuning in and can't wait for you to listen to part two.